Good evening. My name is Joe Bandel and I am the last Rosicrucian. Today we're going to talk about Oak Advantage number 16, retaining happiness. Now, this is the first time we're going to be talking, probably the first time we're really talking about neo-cheaters and how they work, what neo-cheating really is, things like that. But first, it's important to kind of explain the belief that I have, which is when you are doing whatever it is that you are truly meant to do in this life, and you produce values for others that other people want, that brings you prosperity. But also, when you're doing whatever it is that you're meant to do, it benefits both you, your loved ones, your community, and the world in large. In other words, it works. You have to understand that as opposed to what the neo-cheater does, because the neo-cheater works through higher purpose, higher goals, altruistic uh, concepts. And some of them would be oriented around state, society, or God. And what it is an individual, a charismatic individual, will proclaim that they're fighting for a cause. They're fighting for a cause and they need the help, the time, the money of other people so that they can fight the fight, so that they can do it for everybody else. And they'll try to get you to join in. All right, that's the basic. That's how simple it really is, uh, as opposed to the concept of where you're doing what it was you're truly meant to do. These neo cheaters, they will proclaim a goal. They'll wave a flag. They'll use their charisma, and they will convince you that what they're about is more important than whatever it is that you are trying to do in your life. That whatever it is that they're representing, whether it's the government or the state or church or whatever, that it's so important that it requires your help, whether it's time, whether it's blood, whether it's money, and they're very slick at it. And one of the reasons they are so slick at it is because human beings by nature, they are inclined to go along with whatever somebody else suggests. They're inclined to do whatever it is that they're told to do, unless they have a good reason not to. And so they are being taken advantage of. Now, it gets into there's a muddy area where a collective agreement, such as stopping at stop signs, is where everybody kind of agrees, hey, this is the safest way to deal with driving. Everybody follows these traffic laws. Yeah, because it makes sense to do that. But the same people that are doing that could also be coming up with clauses, trying to rally people, get people emotionally riled up to push something else through force, through intimidation, through coercion, and trying to get somebody else to pay for it. In other words, the neo-cheater sets themselves up as a spokesperson to represent what's good and right for individuals, and causing the average person to turn their personal power over to that individual. And then that individual, that neo-cheater, acts with the support of all of these individuals that they've promised to speak for, to fight for. And in a nutshell, that's the entire thing, where the individual is not to speak for themselves because they have a spokesperson that they've chosen to speak for them, supposedly. And the reality is that when it comes down to it, the neo-cheater has to create a goal, an altruistic goal that goes against individual rights, that goes against individual empowerment, because otherwise they would run out of a job. They would run themselves out of a job. It's just like government will run itself out of a job if it solves the problems that it creates or that it confronts. Or the church. Any one of these external authorities, any one of these higher authorities, has its own life, if you will, and seeks to perpetuate its own existence by creating a reason, a need for it to keep going. That's why governments continue to get bigger and bigger and bigger. That's why religions try to get bigger and bigger and bigger. They have a life of their own. And what they're doing is eventually they're sucking the lifeblood, they're sucking the soul out of people, out of the people who believe in them, the people who support them. In the case of wars, governments deliberately create wars and sacrifice the lives of their people in battles, simply to keep their own position, their own empowerment. All of this is the way that, this is one of the ways that the neo-cheater works. Whether it's a politician, whether it's a clergyman, whether it's a life coach. And we're getting into a dicey period in time where, in my opinion, the real empowerment is happening at the root chakra level. We're seeing organic reality in a war, in an existential conflict against head trippers, ideologues. The ideologue is the classic neo-cheater because they are living in their heads, and the only way that they can get rich, the only way they can sustain themselves, is to live off of other people who believe in them. They're not out there in the trenches themselves. They're the ones that are safe where it's safe, raking in the money while everybody else is doing the dirty work. So their entire power is by getting other people to do things for them rather than honestly doing things for themselves. And that's one of the ways you can tell the difference between somebody who has true empowerment and somebody who's a neo-cheater. The person who has true empowerment can actually manifest. They can actually do what they claim. And not only do what they claim, but they can do it without the help of anybody else. In other words, they live by example. How many people do you know that live by example? Do you live by example? Because people who live by example, they're not out there trying to change anybody, trying to make people believe one way or another. They just go along quietly. They're doing what they're meant to do in their heart. And other people are impressed by them. And other people say, how do you do that? Show me how you do that. So they reach out and they ask. And that's totally different than somebody preaching from a pulpit about how you're going to go to hell. Or that if you don't comply with some whatever it is, you ought to be put in jail. Fear, coercion, as opposed to living by example. These are extremely different things. And as our civilization falls apart, and it is falling apart, and the ideologues are getting increasingly violent because the ideologues are increasingly removing themselves from reality, from physical reality, you're getting psychotic breaks that are coming. And the time is coming, and it's not going to be that long from now, when everybody is going to be forced to choose which side of the fence you're on. Again, this ties in with that concept of life and the world demands discipline. But if it is self-discipline, it does not require externally imposed discipline. The only people who are shouting for externally imposed discipline, pass a law on this, are the ones that have no self-discipline themselves. And they are neo-cheaters because they rely on manipulating others to get what they want, because they cannot produce true values by themselves. That's it for this advantage. Give it some thought, try to have it sink in. There will be other ways of looking at this, but this is kind of like the first look we've had at neo-cheating and how it happens, what the techniques are used, where people are convinced to support a single individual rather than become a true individual themselves. Good night, and we'll see you next time.